guys, Panda here, and welcome to another album review for today's episode of Metal Monday. With the sad passing of Alexi Laiho earlier this month, I spent a lot of my time reflecting and listening to a bunch of Bodom's classic songs. Ones like Are You Dead Yet?, Angels Don't Kill, very fitting for the day of his death, and Hate Breeder. These are just a small sample of songs that left us on impact when we were all teenagers. I know a lot of people in my personal life who picked up guitar after listening to this dude just completely shred. I'd also be willing to argue that Children of Bodom were one of the most influential bands that came from another country until Amon Amarth really became well known in the public eye. But personally, after Blood Drunk, I felt like their quality in their music just began to slip away. Songs just felt repetitive, boring, and just didn't pack quite the same wallop that their previous works did. However, this wasn't the case in what ended up becoming their final album, Hexed. This album was considered by many, myself included, spoiler, to be their best work since Hate Crew Death Roll. But was that really the case? Well, today we're not only going to try and answer that question, but also give respects to a fallen legend. So let's jam out to Children of Bodom's Hexed. The first song is The Road. It starts off in a typical Bodom fashion, a sound that heavily accentuates their sound that we've all come to know and love. And to be honest, I was worried throughout the first listen of the song, because for whatever reason, I was afraid that they were going to have the elements of their past three albums, where it sounded the same and it was just bleh. But thankfully, I didn't feel it. Even the breakdown in this sounded great. There's nothing much I can say about this song that can't be said, other than that it's a warm welcome back to Lake Bodom. So to be honest, finding a best track was just as hard as finding a worst track for this album. More on that later. That's how much I thoroughly enjoy this. Hecat's Nightmare almost made it on here, but for the chorus and how that sounds, but the rest of it just kind of falls flat to me. But the best track, oddly enough, for me is definitely the title track, Hexed. Which often doesn't really happen for when albums have a song that's the same title as the album title itself. This one has quite a catchy chorus, and everything that builds up towards it throughout the rest of the song is nothing short of great either. It gives off that great old school Bodom feel, which definitely makes it a worthy track to listen to over and over again. I should know, I have it on my Spotify personal playlist. Even the keyboard solo in this is quite astounding. And the outro has that keyboard aesthetic that I love so much. It's hard for me to put it into words what it sounds like to me, but I love the uniqueness that goes into it. Even the added measure it has a bass solo, sort of, that you can hear in tech death bands like Beyond Creation nowadays. First song was a challenge, but that's only because this album is pretty damn solid. But if I definitely had to pick one track from here that isn't quite on par with the rest of the album, it's definitely Kicked in a Split. First, it has one of the most awkward intros I've ever heard. A drum solo so short that even hardcore bands would tell them to make it longer. Followed by some awkward silence. Not long, thankfully, but it is noticeable. The rest of this album is pretty formulaic Bodom. Constant shredding, bland but solid chorus, and great sound. Again, it wasn't easy for me to pinpoint a really bad track on this album. So this is where it gets weird. The final track on the regular version of Hexed is Knuckle Duster. However, the last track on the deluxe album, which is the one that I have, is a remix version of the same song. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to go with the OG version of Knuckle Duster.
Run down, run down. They need to get it off. You can take it out of me, 'cause you ought to give a fuck. Never ask you to step on my toes. The knuckle duster and you have a 16 under.
Fusion aside, this track is another one that was under consideration for best pick because it truly sounds like an old school Bodom track. All the elements that made old school Bodom greats are there. Killer riffs, catchy chorus, Alexi's classic shredding, and melodic death metal excellence. So that was Bodom's final album, Hexed. Does it stand amongst the great albums of their olden days? Honestly, I would say yes. Sure, the tracks are pretty much of the same caliber of each other throughout the entire album, but that's just a testament to how great this album actually is. Sadly, like I said, this is their final album. Even before Alexi's death, he was kicked out of Children of Bodom back in 2020, only to form Bodom After Midnight, a short-lived project featuring Leho at the helm of it. They only had a small handful of shows, too. But anyway, this album would have been in the proper direction that Children of Bodom needed after their past 3 albums that came out before. Hexed is available physically in local record shops and streaming on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, and all other streaming apps. I'd recommend this to fans of melodic death metal and all Children of Bodom fans. Trust me, there's purists out there. And that does it for this episode of Metal Monday. What are your guys' thoughts on Hexed? Thoughts on Bodom? The genre itself? Got an album you want me to review? Drop it in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button on this. Share amongst friends. And to stay tuned on all metal, heavy metal and video game reviews and discussions. Stay tuned, and I'll check you guys out later in the next video. Later, Gators.